First target was Tobruk on January 21st. It fell within a day, with a total bag of 25,000 Italian prisoners and 256 guns. Again,
I'm shocked. I'm surprised. Like, we're going to be checking out what did Rommel and the Germans think about Australia's soldiers in World War II. We've done a couple of videos and we're meant to understand Australians actually participated in a lot of war, and even war we were not, aware of. Yeah. And today we are going to be checking I think this is basically their strength in war or their participation, during World War II. And let's get right into it. Why is it sounding so emotional? It's so... This is a matter of text. This video we have some direct quotations from Field Marshal, okay? That was related to North Africa. Commonwealth and other armies will be covered in later videos.
After Great Britain declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939, Australia joined in the fight as part of the British Commonwealth. After the successful German invasion of France, Italian leader Il Duce Benito Mussolini wanted to show the Germans that Italy could start a fight with the Allies too, so he ordered the Italian 10th Army to advance into British-controlled Egypt. The Italians promptly advanced almost 60 miles, halted, dug in, and demanded reinforcements. The interesting thing is that, unknown to the Italians, there were few Commonwealth troops in front of them at that time guarding Egypt. The British Western Desert Force consisted of roughly 36,000 soldiers and only about 65 tanks. If the Italians had continued the advance, they almost certainly would have taken the entire country against token resistance.
Wow.
This Egyptian invasion alarmed the British. Egypt not only had the Suez Canal, but was a vital supply location for the British in Africa. Even though the British at this time were greatly outnumbered by the Italians, they devised a very good plan, called Operation Compass, to bluff and bluster and throw sand in the Italian soldiers' eyes.
Whoa. Bluff and buffer.
At the very least, the attacks might scare the Italians into making no further advances into Egypt, and at best it might kick the Italians out of Egypt and make further gains into Libya.
Sorry, I just paused too early in the video, but there's something that I'm confused about. I never knew the Germans actually attacked Egypt.
Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Me too. No knowledge about that.
But we have been seeing a lot of British troops on the Egyptian shore.
Yeah.
But like they've not actually talk about invasion or attack or
anything.
Yeah. Like the Britain are there in Egypt, but we don't know what they're actually doing there. North Africa all the time, but we don't know what they're actually doing there.
Reinforcements were brought in from the Commonwealth to bolster the WDF. The Australian diggers had deployed to the North African desert to support their British brothers in arms in late 1940. They received further training, but not all of their equipment had arrived yet. Even so, they made do with what they had. 6 days after the start of the Commonwealth counterattack in mid-December, the Australian 6th Division relieved the Indian 4th Division. Australia also contributed airmen to the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, as mentioned in an earlier video about it. Since it covers the subject so well, nothing more will be mentioned about it in this video.
I think we need to check the video out.
Yeah.
Operation Compass took the Italians totally by surprise, who believed that they were being overrun by a large army. To the Italians, the enemy seemed to be everywhere.
What was really
Why does it sound like the Australian and the Indian? You heard when he said that they relieved the Indian.
Yeah, the 4th Division.
Of the 4th, you understand? And they took over, and it seems like They were fighting against Italians too.
Yeah, they're fighting against
Wait,
Italian.
was Italian with the Germans?
I don't know.
We don't know
I'm
their.
confused right
The
now.
way the video seems like they're
Mm.
against the Italians,
Yeah.
there, or stopping them from invading the place to
Yeah.
enter more. That's the way this video is portraying it to be.
I am
Me
honestly
too, a bit
confused.
confused though.
As the Commonwealth soldiers advanced, there were pockets of resistance that had been bypassed by the British 7th Armored Division, usually fortresses, that were still manned by large Italian garrisons. At this point, this was entirely a British and Italian battle, and the Afrika Korps had not gotten into the fight yet. The Australian 6th Division was given the hard task of capturing 2 isolated Italian fortresses. The first fortress target was Bardia. The Australians bravely attacked with support from British Matilda tanks and overcame the defensive lines, even though the Italians actually had more men and were in fortified positions. Most of the Italians surrendered within 2 days. Later recounting the history of this, even though he wasn't personally involved in this battle, Rommel wrote, "On the 19th of December, Wavell's forces appeared in front of Bardia and began to lay siege to the fortress. Under cover of RAF bombs and the shells of the Royal Navy, the superb Australian infantry stormed the fortress and forced 20,000 Italians to surrender.
Wow.
The Italian commandant successfully escaped to Tobruk. The 6th Australian Division, led by Major General Mackay, fought the Battle of Bardia on January 3rd through the 5th, 1941. Even though Rommel mentioned 20,000 Italian prisoners taken, it was actually double that at 40,000 and 462 guns taken.
How did they fight that?
It was the first battle of World War II in which an Australian army formation took part, the first to be commanded by an Australian general, and the first to be planned by an Australian staff. The next fortress target was Tobruk on January 21st. It fell within a day, with a total bag of 25,000 Italian prisoners and 256 guns. Again,
I'm shocked. I'm surprised. Like, how did they manage to conquer like large number of army? Despite their, the ammunition not even being like up to standard, like number of standard.
Where do they normally keep all these prisoners? Because I'm hearing 40,000,
There's
20,000.
always prisoners of war,
Yeah, I
there's
know,
a
but where
camp
do they
where-
keep?
Actually, when we fit in this
and the feeding of the prisoners.
Yeah.
When we checked out how ballistic Canada's can be, what they actually prisoners because they don't want to share their resource. Sorry. So wow, this is actually very impressive. Seeing how outnumbered they are, but their tactics and their defense mechanism is
Rommel wrote about the predominantly Australian attack. Despite its tremendously strong defenses, its garrison of 25,000 men and powerful artillery formations with their plentiful supply of stores, this first-class stronghold only managed to hold out for a fortnight, after which the defense collapsed in an attack mainly conducted by infantry tanks. The Italian troops had no real means of defense against the heavily armored British vehicles. Tobruk was actually enveloped on the 6th of January by the 7th Armored Division, but the 6th Australian Division was not completely assembled and ready to deliver the assault until a fortnight later. The attack opened on the 21st, and by early next morning all resistance had been overcome. Notice that Rommel mentioned that the Italians couldn't defeat the British tanks. These were probably Matildas. The Australian 6th Division later pushed west along the coast road and captured Benghazi on February 4th.
wow. I think he's the person in charge of the Italian.
Rommel complemented Australian speed in the advance. The British Northern Column, with Australians in the lead, made rapid progress. 5 days later, Western Desert Forces Operation Compass was halted because of a need for repairs and resupply. This operation had exceeded even the most optimistic of British hopes and unhinged the Italian positions in North Africa. Due to an earlier commitment, British Prime Minister Winston
where most of these soldiers spend their days during wartime. Like, you see them sleeping in holes in the middle of the day. Like, come on. Like, these soldiers, honestly, to be frank, they deserve more than just our respect. They deserve recognition. Like, we recognize medical doctors, but to be frank, honestly, the most special field that should be recognized are the soldiers. These guys go way beyond and above.
They go band for band.
Do you understand?
Bullet for bullet.
Like, I'm not saying I don't appreciate doctors. You understand? I'm saying, like, if you
without them, they won't be that.
Do you understand? Honestly, seeing them in this kind of state sometimes, I'm like,
wow.
Sorry for the pause.
Churchill ordered a large Commonwealth expeditionary force to support Greece against the upcoming German invasion in Operation Leicester, and the Austrian 6th Division was sent. The Austrian 9th Division replaced them in the line in North Africa. The exploits of the Western Desert Force earned a parody of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill's famous quote, "Never has so much been owed by so many to so few." So many Italians were captured by the Western Desert Force that British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden joked, "Never has so much been surrendered by so many to so few." Germany and Italy responded to these defeats by rushing Italian reinforcements to Libya to defend Tripoli, assisted by the Deutsches Afrikakorps and the...
Sorry, I want to go back a bit. I had something that I want to be sure that I had it.
Germany and Italy responded.
Italy responded to these defeats by rushing Italian reinforcements to Libya to defend Tripoli, assisted by the Deutsches Afrikakorps and the increased Luftwaffe presence. Almost all German generals and senior officers had fought in the First World War. Although initially some of the German leadership may have believed that Australians were just British troops with different hats, time would adjust their thinking in a major way. They probably had heard about the Australians at Gallipoli in the First Great War and how the Australians were feared in hand-to-hand combat. Later, when Rommel planned an attack on Tobruk in 1941, he compared his own troops' training to his British and Australian counterparts. Meanwhile, feverish training was going on among the forces detailed for the attack, as it had become only too evident that the training of our infantry in position warfare was nowhere near up to the standard of the British and Australians. This we now intended to correct. Later on in the same battle for Tobruk, some Australians had the bravery and audacity to try to raid a German ammunition dump, but were captured. Rommel watched them marched off to the stockade and related in admiration. Shortly afterwards, a batch of some 50 or 60 Australian prisoners was marched off close beside us, immensely big and powerful men, who without question represented an elite formation of the British Empire, a fact that was also evident in battle. A year later, in the First Battle of El Alamein, Rommel paid a compliment to either the South Africans or the Australians, or both, about the heavy enemy artillery fire and the extremely well-constructed line, which included many dug-in tanks. But the attack miscarried, not even reaching the line of the 9th Australian Division, which had taken over the fortress area from the 1st South African several days before. The reason for this failure, apart from the heavy enemy artillery fire and their extremely well-constructed line, which included many dug-in tanks. In a letter to his wife Lucia, Rommel wrote, implying that Australians were worthy opponents. With the sun at their backs, our units fought their way forward from south to north as far as the area between the road and the railway, where the attack came to a halt. Fierce fighting followed with the Australians, whom we knew only too well from the time of the Tobruk siege, and lasted well into the night. Rommel mentioned how the Australians were trying to roll up our front. The Australians had attacked from El Alamein again, this time towards the southwest. They had soon penetrated our line, and had taken a large number of Italians prisoner. Now they were trying to roll up our front to the south. Rommel mentioned Australian bravery, attacking and overcoming through a curtain of fire, although the Germans later counterattacked and regained the position. On the moonlit night of the 26th of July 1942, the Australians attacked again, this time in brigade strength. Their objective was the German line west. The assembly had been made in all secrecy, and the assault, which was preceded by a violent RAF bombing attack, consequently achieved a considerable measure of surprise. Despite the curtain of fire which was at once put down by the German-Italian artillery, the Australians succeeded in penetrating our front and wiping out the greater part of one German battalion. Rommel stated that Australian and New Zealand infantry were excellent, while discussing battle tactics in the desert. In this form of action, the full value of the excellent Australian and New Zealand infantry would be realized, and the British artillery would have its effect. To German soldiers, the Australians fought unlike any men they had ever faced, and some of these Germans had fought the Russians on the Eastern Front. Apparently, they were some of the toughest soldiers in the war. They were hardy and excellent soldiers who fought for their mates.
The gun power.
Rommel wrote in his diary that the Aussie defense of El Alamein made it impossible to take at the moment, although it's unclear which battle of El Alamein Rommel meant exactly. It's understandable that he didn't want to broadcast that outlook to the rest of his Afrika Korps. Some Germans hated fighting the Australians because they considered them to be like animals from down under by the way they fought in both world wars. According to at least one source, Australian soldiers didn't always consider it a high priority in the heat of battle to take enemy prisoners, unless specifically ordered to do so, or there were very large numbers of them surrendering en masse, like at Bardia or Tobruk. Enemy machine gunners were especially hated and invariably got shot or stuck. The esteemed Afrika Korps was very impressed with the Australians they fought and had a healthy respect for them. In every source, you won't find any bad comments from any German, whether a regular soldier or a field marshal like Rommel, but many comments held the Australian forces in very high regard, with adjectives like excellent and powerful. However, there wasn't always a great deal of respect for their British commanders, and it would take Montgomery's arrival to change that attitude. A popular story at the time, which may or may not be true, is that when Montgomery was appointed to command the Commonwealth Army in North Africa, he remarked, "After having an easy war, things have now got much more difficult." A colleague is supposed to have told him to cheer up, at which point Montgomery said, "I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about Rommel." According to many people, Rommel stated, "If I had to take hell, I would use the Australians to take it and the New Zealanders to hold it." Perhaps he did say this, because so many people have repeated it, but no original source can be found for this quote. If anyone does have an original source, please share it in the comments section, because many people would like to read it.
Wow.
At the end of Operation Compass, Commonwealth soldiers took over 138,000 Italian and Libyan prisoners, hundreds of tanks, and more than 1,000 guns, and many aircraft against WDF losses of 1,900 men killed and wounded, which was about 10% of the Allied infantry. So, here's the surprise that will probably change your mind about Rommel's attitude toward Australian soldiers forever. At the end of the war, Rommel's family hid his trunk with his photographs and memorabilia. According to his son Manfred, the trunk contained my father's complete set of camera equipment, personal effects, and about 3,000 snapshots which my father had himself taken. He was particularly proud of his color photographs, some of which had been taken with a certain amount of danger to himself. One I remember, which was most impressive, showed Australian infantry attacking with bayonets. Notice that the photographs were taken by Rommel himself at great danger in the midst of battle.
I was actually thinking of that.
Rommel was so impressed by Australian infantry attacking with bayonets that he photographed them while they were attacking, and then brought back the pictures to his home as keepsakes.
Photographers never die. Cameraman never die. They never die.
Most of the Australian soldiers just wanted the war to end to get back to their girlfriends or wives.
Just some of them did.
To say what the Aussies thought of the Germans, well, no worries, mate. I hope you enjoyed this video. Videos for other nations of the Commonwealth are being planned and created.
This is the one.
That's not the
Okay, this was really informative.
Yeah.
To be honest, at some point we were battling, I think failing to understand why we were actually against the Italian, and then we remember. But to see how fierce and how ballistic the Australians can be in war is actually very surprising to us. I know they've participated in a lot of wars, and I'm so shocked to see how little their manpower can be and how much
impact
it can give to their opponent. Like,
you see, to show you how their enemy, his enemy, how their enemy were marveled at their impressive feats in the battle. That the general, I think that the Rommel is a general, right?
Yeah.
That he literally risked his life taking pictures of them charging into battle with a bayonet.
Wow.
I want you to imagine that, like,
For me, like, what I'm actually thinking, right, is it a pattern strategy they use to go into the war, or is it the man force, like the aggressiveness?
It's
It could
everything.
be
I think it's everything.
It's two combo
He
together.
said
Like,
Yes.
Rommel was so surprised seeing them charge fiercely.
like this is just man of Vikings. The way they just like charge into action.
This
like,
is
without-
it's crazy to see.
without thinking
Oh,
about the
Yeah,
results.
their involvement and participation is something we need to recognize all the time. It's really baffling, and I love it. I love their strength, their manpower, their energy. You guys, let me know what you think about this down in the comment section. You can as well keep comments about what you think of the video, and if anything is missing or we got one or two wrong from the video, you can tell me in the comment section. We're reading your comments, loving your comments as well. See you guys on our next one. Bye.